details of before we get into the details of the PG certificate. So the Center for Competition Policy is one of Europe's leading interdisciplinary centers focused on a combination of competition, regulation, and consumer policy. Our name is a little bit lacking in the full description of what we do because of our additional focus on regulation and consumer policy that's not there in the name. And what we do is really conduct independent policy-focused research. We're very interested in practical academic work. We further organize bespoke professional development activities, and we run specialist events such as conferences, workshops, and have a regular seminar series. We have about 30 members and a roughly equivalent number of affiliates of the center. So we're actually quite a large group. And one of the areas of special focus we have is the connection between academic work and policy work or government work, with many of us actually having worked in government ourselves, in addition to being qualified PhD economists or lawyers. And so some of those organizations we've worked with in the past include the European Commission, the Competition and Markets Authority, the Financial Conduct Authority, Ofgem, Ofcom, Ofwat, the World Bank, and the Department for Business Innovation and Skills within the UK. But I would emphasize that our focus in this certificate class is really on principles that are of value for international use, that is for regulators or practitioners, wherever they may be. And so we have many people who have who've signed up for this, who are practitioners from Latin America to Asia, who found the material really valuable and something that that's very accessible, because the way we organize this this certificate is by a virtual training and virtual classes. So what we have found is that the students who attend our virtual classes really have a wonderful experience. We organize those classes in modules and have 9 different modules, which we're going to describe in the course of today's call. And we do also record the sessions that we hold, as well as providing the materials live. And so if you can't make a particular session, it's really okay, because we do have ways for you to access the material that we went through by recording. Now I'm going to, at this point, hand over to Peter Courage, who is the manager of the Center for Competition Policy, and will make a brief presentation about this postgraduate certificate. One thing I should mention, just from the name, because it's not clear necessarily to everyone from outside the UK, the postgraduate certificate is kind of a part of a master's degree. You might think of it that way. So it's intended for students who already have a bachelor's degree, but might not have it in the exact areas that we're focused on. And so in the UK, we call this a postgraduate certificate, but other countries might have different names for it. Over to you, Peter.
Okay, thank you, Sean. Can you just confirm you can see the presentation I've put up okay?
I confirm.
Great, excellent. So to everyone who's joined us on the call, thank you for joining us this afternoon. Just to note that the Q&A and chat functions of this webinar are open. So if you think of any questions that we haven't answered during the duration of this course, please feel free to write in, and we'll obviously do our best to answer those. But here right now is a very brief overview of the course and its structure. So to begin with, this is us. Centre for Competition Policy is home at the University of East Anglia, and this is a university based in the United Kingdom, home to 14 to 15,000 students in any given year. The centre, although it's a research centre in its own right, it's sponsored by 4 of our school departments at the UEA. And they are the schools of economics, the Norwich Business School, the School of Law, and the School of Political Science. So the Centre for Competition Policy itself will be based, if you can see on the top right corner, this lovely looking stately home building, which is known as Earlham Hall. That it will be our, that is effectively our base of operations going forwards. And just for anyone who is outside of the UK, just to give you a sense of where we are and everything, here's a map of the UK, and we are based in the fine medieval city of Norwich. You can see us there on the little waypoint, red waypoint there on the map. So we're about 2 hours from London, and we have our own flight connections directly to Norwich as well. What we would say is, as well as our sort of annual cycle of events and this particular course, if anyone is from an organisation where you'd be interested in engaging with us, we do actually have a regular annual visitor programme where we have played host to visitors from competition authorities and practitioners from across the world. So if it's of your interest to actually one day come and visit us or arrange some sort of cross collaboration, please do get in touch and we'd be more than happy to hear from you. So just to give you a brief overview of the University of East Anglia, if you're not aware of this institution, we are top 20 for research quality in the latest Research Excellence Framework, and we're also top 50 for research impact. That is what the impact our research has externally in beyond the academic world. So just to go on to the course itself. So this particular course can be undertaken through 2 particular course pathways. The first pathway is the certificate pathway, and that relies on gaining the actual formal postgraduate certificate award, and that would rely on the undertaking of 6 out of our 9 modules, which will, the exact content of those modules we'll come on to in a moment. There is also another pathway if you're less inclined to undertake the full certificate, or you just want to take a couple of modules and see how it goes. We also have a credit-only pathway. And what credit-only means is it means you are not obliged to undertake 6 modules, but any number between 1 and 5. And you may take these modules as per the calendar, like everyone else. And if that's all you want to take, that's absolutely fine. You would just finish with a transcript at the end of your student course time. Or if you wanted to proceed further and upgrade to the full certificate pathway, you would very much be able to migrate those individual module awards and costs of those modules into the certificate program. So on an annual basis, we have the running of 9 modules in total. And each module, in terms of engagement, requires 6 3-hour live online sessions. And as Sean said, these sessions are all recorded. So we're aware the market for this course is very much people who are already employed full-time and of course across the world. So it's not always possible to join us on Fridays from 2 till 5. But in the cases where you're unable to make it, all these sessions are recorded, and we have had students from as far as New Zealand who, given the time difference, have actually been able to engage with this course and successfully complete it. What I would say is Fridays 2 to 5 is our standard arrangement for the modules. There is some variation to this, and we'll highlight that where a module deviates from that weekly template. The course itself, when you sign up for this course, regardless of whether it's a credit only or the certificate pathway, you will be signed up as a university student for a 2-year duration. But anything you do, but you can complete the certificate within 1 full year. So if you joined us this September, you could very much be expecting to receive your award effectively the following Christmas. However, we do allow for a 2-year student duration with us. That is to allow for different pacing of study. So some candidates who wish to join us, they have the space and time to be able to undertake their 6 modules within a single academic year. That's not possible for everyone, and plans do indeed change. So we have a 2-year course option, which means it's possible to take that intensity of 6 modules and fan it out over 2 years. So for example, doing 3 modules a year instead of 6 in one. And if you're interested in joining this course when we're done, we do have a September intake, which is due to start Friday, the 26th of September, I think is our first teaching day. And if you're still interested by the end of this call, there is still time to join us in time for September. But if you need more time and you want to maybe join us at a later date, we also have intakes that run in January and April as well. And regardless of where you start within those entry points, you don't lose or gain anything by any one particular point. You will undertake the same run of modules, just in a slightly different order, depending on your entry point. And also just to mention that if you do undertake the PG Cert, that award the University of East Anglia is an accredited UK higher education provider, which means when you do your 6 modules, and when we are talking about a certificate, we actually mean a physical certificate. So you would have you would get the award conferred, and you would be able to receive your certificate in the post. And you can even join us for graduation, the physical graduation that occurs here every July. And some students have indeed elected to do that. If you do, please do let us know you're coming along, because we do like to receive our students and take them out for a good celebratory meal and all that sort of thing. So here is the course schedule for this coming academic year. And these are the 9 modules that make up part of the program. So I'll just run through these in terms of calendar order, and then we'll break out to the rest of the speakers on this call to describe their individual modules and what the learning outcomes of those would be. So to start with, in September, there are 2 modules that run simultaneously. And as a student, you'd only need to take one or the other of these. And we'll go into a bit more detail later as terms of why that is. So you have industrial organization principles, or core industrial organization. That will be the first module you would undertake were you to start in September. Following on from that, you can take special topics in industrial organization in November 2025. And those are the only 3 we run in the lead up to the winter break. Then we have that winter break, and coming off of that, we have another 2 modules that start in January, which is the competition and regulatory law module and the core statistics module. Then moving into February, we have empirical industrial organization. And then as we move into the spring and summer, we have modules in April 26 on digital policy, then behavioral policy in May 2026, and finally the academic year finishes with regulatory economics in July 2026. So if you were looking to undertake this course on a part-time basis over 2 years, this pattern of modules would repeat itself once per academic year. So in your first year, you could opt to take whichever modules were of your preference, and in the second year, you could opt to take another selection of modules to make up to the 6 you need to get the certificate award. So you'll notice on this listing that 3 of the modules have been given a little yellow asterisk next to them. I wanted to highlight those ones because they are what I loosely describe as technical modules, which means it is in these particular modules where you would experience the use of statistical data and economic math. The applicants who come to us have a range of experiences prior to starting this course. Some are already very experienced and engaged in the application of economic math, and others are more a practitioner in competition and policy on a theoretical and discursive basis. So the ones that aren't asterisks are basically done on assignment only as their submissions. So to pass each one of those that is not asterisk, you would be looking at written essays. For the ones that are asterisks, you would be expected to complete an assignment with the use of statistical software or the application of economic math. What I will say is in some of the modules that are not asterisks, you will still encounter some equations and economic math, but that is largely for the benefit not of completing your assignment, but for those who are familiar with the economic math and can use it as part of their enhanced learning. So just to give you a flavour of that, if you wish not to undertake any modules with economic math and just did the course on a theoretical and discursive basis, this would be your pathway in terms of completing the course. You'd have industrial organisation principles, the specialist topics modules, and then the 4 following on from there. What I would say, and what George will come on to later, is our core statistics module, sorry, that happens every January, is intended for students who have no background in statistical mathematics. And this would be your opportunity to try such a course and have a go at obtaining greater understanding of statistical software and its application. So for the technical pathway, the options to you are far larger because you have the inclusion of those 3 technical modules as well. Okay, finally, just a few more notes on the course and its structure. As Sean said, all lectures are recorded. So the best experience we always recommend is that you can attend these modules and these sessions live, so you are able to engage with the teachers and the content. However, for the benefit of everyone and even revisiting the content for your assignments, all these lectures are recorded, and these will be stored in an access space that you have on our virtual learning platform, and you can access these recordings for as long as you need to. As part of this virtual learning platform, all core readings and resources are provided, and indeed we embed a lot of module flexibility within our program. Say, for example, you want to undertake a module and you have a caseload on, which means to undertake the module now, it is simply not practical for you to do so, to commit to it to the extent that you'd want to. Of course, we have the module cycle again next year, so we could just simply roll it over, or indeed allow you to change module options. So to anyone who is starting with us in September and you have made module options already, it's entirely flexible in terms of whether you wish to change one over when, as needs must during the course. For the assignments, at the end of the 6th session of each module, there would be an assignment released and a deadline of, it's normally about 2 weeks. But within that, again, being fully aware that everyone who's undertaking this course is a working professional, to request an extension of that deadline is perfectly possible. You can self-certify an extension for a further 7 days, and with further evidence, you can even extend beyond that for another 21 days if you really need to. These modules are assessed on a pass-fail basis, but if for some reason you would fail a module, it is not the end of the course because there are reassessment opportunities as well. As for the module leads that undertake each module, they are available by email and for one-to-ones should you want to discuss anything about the module content in particular. And as a member, as someone who signs up to this course, you are a formal student at the University of East Anglia. And though you're online only, that does mean you get complete online access to the UEA library, where you have not only access to any content that relates to this course, but actually anything on the UEA library database at all. And compliments of being one of our PG Cert students, we run a seminar series at 11 a.m. in the morning on Thursdays, and you would get a complimentary invite to these seminars, and you may very well enjoy taking them in and their content. And finally, again, as a student, we would give you a complimentary invite to our annual CCP conference, which happens in London. And as I said before, should you fully complete the course, you can actually join us for a proper in-person graduation in our summer. And here's just an example of a couple of our students who came all the way from Trinidad and Tobago, and as I said, joined us for the graduation and a rather nice meal at the end of the time as well. Okay, so that is my presentation complete, and I will just unshare that for a second. Stop share. Okay, I think now, Sean, if we go through the individual modules, if we start off with principles in industrial organization and core industrial organization, if I allow you to start on principles, Sean. Okay,
thank you very much, Peter. We'll make these descriptions pretty short, something like 3 minutes each. And so I'm going to be talking about the industrial organization principles module, which is actually co-taught with 2 of my colleagues. And the objective of this really is to provide an introduction to industrial organization economics in a way that's really appropriate for someone with any background. So it could be for economists, but it could also be for lawyers or other non-economists who don't necessarily need to get into the details of the math of microeconomics. And so we have another module that's intended for you if that's what you're interested in. But this module has been really successful in working with lawyers, historians, and some economists as well who are focused primarily on intuition. The topics we're going to cover are consumers and the firm, where we look at consumer preferences and how demand is constructed, how it's created, how it works. Then we'll look at competition and market failure. Peter, by the way, would you mind muting while you're typing? If you could, thanks. We're going to focus on some of the different models of competition. So perfect competition would be one, but also various types of restrictions on competition that come about from market failure. We will look at games and oligopoly theory. So we're going to introduce you to things like Nash equilibrium, sequential games, repeated games, and some of the ways that they interact within the microeconomics and in particular with firms. Imagine firms playing a game with each other. We're going to talk about market foreclosure and collusion. So from a theoretical economics perspective, so we'll be looking at mechanisms by which a firm might foreclose a market from its competitors, and we'll look at various ways in which entry deterrence operates, including from exclusive contracts, various types of bundling, and other types of foreclosure. Finally, we're going to focus on vertical relations between firms. That's where one firm is selling to another, who might be selling to another. And we'll be thinking about questions like whether vertical integration might solve a problem of the firm and actually help it to deliver products in a better way. So one of the ideas behind some economic theory is that vertical integration helps to solve problems of governing transactions that might otherwise be very they fit into the context of vertical relationships. So that's this module in a nutshell. And I will, at this point, hand over to Farasat, who's going to, I think, describe the one that's maybe describe some of the details of how the more mathematical version that covers similar material works.
Yes, thank you very much, Sean. So yes, the very brief version of what I can say is I'm going to teach somewhat similar stuff that Sean is teaching, except I'll do it right. No, I'm kidding. The main difference is it's not so much more mathematical, but it's more covering the core models that people talk about in any IO class. So the idea is to give you a flavor of what is usually taught at a master's level, typical IO class, with the models in there, the economic models, but providing the intuition behind it and building that up. That sometimes requires a little bit of math in it, but the level of math is not going to be more than A levels level, because we touch upon some concepts that are taken from calculus, but by and large, when you're actually solving anything, you don't need anything more than algebra. So it will use graphs and algebra and some concepts about what's a derivative or whatever to talk about it. The main 6 lectures will be centered around 6 topics. These topics will be what we call the bread and butter topics in any IO class. And they'll cover essentially monopoly, oligopoly models, price discrimination, vertical and horizontal product differentiation, entry deterrence, and then horizontal and vertical mergers. So very similar stuff to what Sean and Franco will be teaching. I'll just be doing it with slightly more use of actual models that are going in there. And hopefully they'll be, prepared. Either of these 2 modules will prepare you well to then take the more advanced topics that Kayuwe will be teaching. And I'll with that hand over to Kayuwe.
Thank you, Farzad. And of course, my course is going to be even lighter than yours, relative. No, so the topics course is really one that tries to go deeper into some of the more frontier issues in competition policy, and is therefore probably conceptually more difficult, but is concentrating on a number of topics more deeply. Doesn't deviate from the principle that yes, there's some math in there. It's usually very useful for those with an economics background who have seen mathematical modeling, but it's not necessary in order to take the course or understand the course. For a deeper understanding, it's always helpful to know the math because it allows you to be kind of more rigorous about completely understanding how things fit together. But we will be very much talking intuitively about the mechanisms and link them to actual cases and so on. So it is, again, a course that has very much practice in mind. We'll give you examples on cases where these things are being applied and is very much geared to have a bit more intuition. Topic-wise, there are basically four larger topics that will be kind of brought in kind of 6 lectures. One of these is generally related to digital markets, but also making it more broadly. I've split that up because into first covering very intensively vertically related markets, because there's a vertical dimension to virtually everything that are digital markets. And vertical markets is one of the intuitively more difficult topics generally. I try to do that with something that's a relatively unified framework. So I will, not because I think it's the most important topic as such, but do it in a framework of retail price maintenance, just in order to develop the intuition, because one can very systematically go through effects that are relevant in that context about basic competitive effects of restrictions on vertical relationships and the relationships in the complementarity that is there and the effects that has on substitutability. We'll deal some with exclusive dealing and exclusion in that context. And therefore, I give you a fairly comprehensive view of vertical relations and use that in some of the following lectures. Some of the topics we're covering then is one of them is what I call competition in marketplaces. One of the things that's really important there is that you don't always know whether products are substitutes or complements. And very often products on marketplaces are complements to each other, whilst marketplaces among each other are substitutes. And so the questions of what is competition or not may differ, and I'll give you a couple of examples. So we're going to go through kind of the ideas, kind of you looking at Uber, and I have several other applications up to some ski resorts even that will give you further intuitions of what goes on in that. We will, of course, cover two-sided markets, but kind of in a way that relates it back to the analysis of vertical related markets to give you a little bit different perspective, which in my view really helps the analysis of practical cases. There's going to be some things on ecosystems and their relationships to theories of aftermarkets, and a couple of other things in there that also link antitrust and DMA issues. So that's kind of that part. There is going to be a part on collusion and information exchange that I think is highly relevant in the context of modern litigation in this area on damages, and for that it's really important to have that framework. There's going to be a third part that is going to be on mergers. I'm slightly restructuring this part because in mergers, some of the theories of harm are coming back to be more important, like theories of harm on verticals that have played less of a role and are brought up again much more in antitrust at the moment, as well as kind of new approaches to conglomerate effects, and also first applications of ideas of ecosystems in mergers. So that's going to be kind of part of the merger part. And then there's going to be one lecture that I want to do on state aid, and present you kind of some interesting case material that will introduce you to some of those concepts, but very concretely in the context of a very specific case that I think you are going to find interesting. Yes. So who's next?
So I think we'll continue along the calendar then. And if we then go to George to talk about core statistics.
All right, thank you, Peter. Hello, everyone. So I'm George. I'm associate professor in econometrics in the School of Economics, but also leading this core statistics module, which, as the title suggests, is an introductory statistics module. But I will also be introducing you to the world of econometrics. As Peter said earlier, the module does not require any knowledge in math or statistical skills, so we'll be starting from scratch. And therefore, this module is for everyone without a background in statistics, mathematics, or econometrics. So if you don't have this background, we're starting from the very basic things in statistics, like descriptive summary statistics, graphical presentations, manipulating variables in statistical software, and so on. But then gradually we'll be moving into more interesting things, like we'll be talking about inferential statistics, where we draw inference about the whole population just based on data, just based on particular data set. We'll be building inference for the whole population of interest. And then we'll be moving gradually into econometrics and basically regression analysis, which is the foundational tools taught in econometrics, where we'll be focusing on associations between variables, and we'll be focusing on causal relationships between variables as opposed to mere correlations. So the module is for those without background in statistics, but also for those who do have some background some time ago and would like to refresh their knowledge in statistics and econometrics. And of course, anybody who would like to do the more advanced module in empirical industrial organization, this module will provide you with the skills required for the more advanced module in empirical IO. Yeah, and of course, yeah, sorry.
No, it's okay. Go on, George.
Yeah, just say a couple of more things. So the module will cover a bit of statistical theory, a bit of mathematics will be useful. As I said, everything will be done from scratch, so you don't need to worry about that. But the focus will be on the application of statistics using some special software. We'll be using Stata in this module. So everything will, a lot of work we'll be doing will be in Stata statistical software. And all of you will, as student at UA, you will have access to this software, the latest version, which is 19.5. You'll be given access to the software as well. So our lecture will be a combination of me talking about statistics, but also will be practical in terms of you working with data alongside myself. Yeah, thank you, Peter.
Many thanks, George. And now I'll pass over to Sarah, who's going to talk about our regulatory law module.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. So in my module, you will get a good understanding of what are the substantive and procedural rules of competition law, and as well as the core economic principles of competition. So in practice, this means that we will look at a wide array of possible anti-competitive behavior. We will link them to the economic theories of harm that you will have partly covered already with Cayuve, and then we will look at how these economic theories of harm are translated into law. In terms of specific topics, I will start in the first two sessions to look into horizontal agreements and vertical agreements. So in terms of horizontal agreements, we will cover cartels, both like the traditional cartels, but also cartels that have like a more modern phase. So for instance, algorithmic cartels and kind of concerted practices. In terms of vertical agreements, we will look at selective distribution systems, exclusive dealings, and we will look at, once again, both the case law and that evolved around these topics, but also specific regulations such as the vertical block exemption regulation. Then we will move over to abuse of dominance. Once again, we'll cover the economic theory of abuse of dominance. We'll look at possible kinds of abuse, such as rebates. When do rebates constitute an abuse of dominance? When are they allowed? We'll look at different pricing practices, tying, and we will cover the main big case law that emerged in the past years. We will spend quite some time looking at all of the various Google saga, mostly in the European jurisdiction, but we'll also cover the other jurisdictions in which Google was subject to case law. And we will then move to the next session to look at the digital regulation that is emerging in the recent years to cover the digital dimension of competition. The focus will be on the Digital Markets Act in the European Union and on the Digital Markets Competition and Consumers Act here in the UK. Finally, we will look at mergers and once again, economic theory and legal framework in order to tackle what are anti-competitive mergers. And the last session will be dedicated to remedies. At the end of the module, the expectation is that you will be able to understand how competition law develops over time, how it relates to economic theory, and you will understand the importance and the relevance of various enforcement strategies, but also you'll be able to apply relevant procedural and substantive law to real world. Tests will be, as Peter mentioned before, an assessment. So only one question, 1,000 words. And I guess that's it. And Franco, I guess you're next.
Yeah. Am I next, Peter? Confirm, is it?
You are indeed, Franco. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for your time. So I'm Franco Mariuzzo. Frassa mentioned my name, but in referring to this other module that I could teach, which is Introduction to Industrial Organization, alongside Andrea Kalev, we teach together that module. So now we're in the head of these empirical industrial organizations, and before I tell you what we teach, just to tell you the credibility, the Farasat and I, together with a former PhD student, we just got the Best Prize Award this last week in the International Journal of Industrial Organizations, and it was awarded at the European Association for Research in Industrial Economics. So maybe by pure chance, but there is some credibility on the module. Now, coming back, what the module is about is it provides an introduction to empirical method used in industrial organizations. And what we do, we focus on competition policy, most of it. It combines, if you want, theory of econometric methods and applied data work. And what we do, try to analyze how firms behave in markets and also how market outcome can be measured and how perhaps competition authorities use quantitative evidence in policy decisions. So this is what has been designed, this module, when we originally started. We put in different ingredients from applied econometrics to, if you want, analysis of data, but the application most relevant is for competition policy decisions and training to do that. So the content is, if in terms of econometric method, we cover topics like multivariate regressions, nonlinear models. We do, if you want, panel data analysis, and then some we call more specialized topics and identification of causal effect, analysis of the market. We apply this to, if you want, analysis of market definitions, business entry and exit, horizontal merger simulation, evaluation of damages, and you want demand estimation. So you can see some core topics of competition policies will be covered from the application through, if you want, some of the core elements of this module. And we take real world example typically, and then where we just do, we play with data, we do, if you want, exploration of data using the package. As the software I use typically is data, and which has been covered also by George. But, I think if you know the previous experience, all the codes will be shared with you to try to run, and also we will share you an introduction for that. And this is the year just to make basic application through that way. I think what we can get from this model is you will acquire some knowledge of standard econometrics approaches that are typically used in industrial organization and competition policy, and you will develop, I believe, analytical and practical skills, and which should enable to estimate, interpret, which is important, and present quantitative results that are relevant to market, if you want, the behavior, policy interventions, we do a lot, and industry structure. So the assessment, there will be one assessment, we call it a project. The project, we're going to use a data that we typically will cover in the modules, and we do some analysis of competition in the market of some sort. And then there is a technical component. We do a little bit of coded in data, which will have been covered in the lecture, so not much more deviations from there. But also there is, if you want, a small essay component where you non-technical still can come in. And this opens up also to, to answer the question, is this a module only suitable for people with have expertise in economics and knowledge of data? The answer is not. So the module had prior, if you want, attendees who had not such a background. And then what we design the module is basically by having open up that, everything is ready for you to use and to learn to use by, replicating what is being shared with you, but also the assessment include a non-technical component, which involves describing perhaps a competition policy or regulatory decisions. So even if your technical side is weak, you can still get your model through that way. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Franco. There was just one question that came in on the Q&A, which is how much macro-focused content will we get whilst doing your module?
It's mainly micro, sorry. Thanks for asking that. This we cover is, I've done macro in the past, but this is mainly a micro model. Yeah. It's all microeconometrics, not macroeconometrics. We do, it's not the first lecture when I take the econometric methods, does cover some time series elements, but I would say it's rudimental time series. That's why I say it's more microeconometrics method.
Okay, thank you, Franco. I appreciate that. And now we'll move on to digital policy with Sean.
Okay, thank you, Peter. The digital policy module is really focused on digital platforms and the increased government interventions in the digital economy that one can see are still rapidly evolving and are fundamentally altering what the business opportunities and responsibilities are in this domain. We've got a number of different foci for the sessions we have. One of them is on market power and how to think about that specifically with request to platforms, including for search, for ecosystems and advertising. We're going to discuss the concept of market dominance and how to apply that within digital companies and digital products. We're going to have a lot of practical examples from real cases. And we're going to talk about digital mergers and ecosystems, and in particular, how the theories that explain why digital-oriented mergers might particularly enhance market power at certain times compared to more standard mergers. And we're also going to talk about the ecosystem concept, building on some of the points that Kayuve would have made. We will have a session that focuses on online harms. This is an increasing area of regulation with respect to digital platforms, and it is actually quite important and complex. So fake news is a real concern among policymakers, and with the thought that it might actually distort democratic processes. And then there are a number of concerns also for how people's general views may become more extremist in the context of digital platforms and the choice of material that's presented to people. And we're going to discuss some of these points, including how addiction and digital addiction may work from an economic perspective. We'll focus on digital regulation, explaining many of the different digital regulations that have already been passed, as well as some of those that are being considered for the future. And finally, we're going to talk about privacy and how data markets and privacy may be interacting, and ultimately, I think, feeding into the question of the extent to which GDPR is really addressing the concerns that people do have with privacy, or whether it's not addressing those concerns. And we're going to think about some of the consequences of privacy policies on other activities, including tensions with data mobility and openness. So that's a quick introduction to this session. And this will be one of those, as Peter mentioned, has an assessment that's based on a short essay that would build on the concepts of the module.
Thank you very much, Sean. And now we'll pass over to Amelia to discuss behavioural policy.
Okay, so my session, my module is effectively about behavioural science, behavioural economics, and its implications for competition policy, consumer policy, regulation. And it's really, I think it's an interesting area. It's quite challenging to teach because things keep developing very quickly in this area. Behavioral economics wasn't really considered as particularly relevant to any of these things maybe 15 years ago. And now they are increasingly recognized as being relevant right across the board, and are feeding into cases and policy decisions all over the place. So what I do in the session is, first of all, first session is basically an introduction to behavioral and economics. I talk about things like the importance of frictions and habits, all the various behavioral biases that are observed due to our bounded rationality that we all share. I do even get into the fact that firms may not always exhibit perfect profit maximization, essentially their equivalent of bounded rationality, getting a little bit into the internal organization of the firm literature. But generally in the module, although I talk a little bit about that, and in particular around implications for cartel behavior, I don't do too much on the firm side because actually that has fed into policy less. I do much more on the consumer side where it has fed into policy much more. The second session is really thinking about the implications of behavioral economics. Behavioral economics is a huge area now, and you can, if you buy any book about behavioral economics, there'll be tons of interesting and important things in there, but actually less about how they implicate the effect on market outcomes, the kind of industrial organization stuff that we were talking about earlier. So I'm going to really focus on that, how we would expect market outcomes to be changed, and introducing you to the concept of behavioral industrial organization, which is basically everything that had been taught in the industrial organization course, but adding some behavioral economics as well. Third session is, I sometimes switch sessions 3 and 4, but the third session at the moment is on consumer policy. I think it might be the only time consumer policy is taught on this course, but I see it as absolutely going hand in glove with competition policy. They're both about making markets work better, and I'm quite passionate about the fact we should all know more about, all competition experts should know more about consumer policy. So I do consumer policy and behavioral economics, which is partly also just an introduction to consumer policy. Then a session on implications of behavioral economics for competition policy, where I can talk about some of the recent cases that it's actually been taken much more seriously in the Google search case in the US being a very recent example where a huge amount of behavioral evidence was considered. Then there is a session on empirical methods of behavioral economics, where we talk about randomized controlled trials and also lab experiments. I don't actually teach that session. Two colleagues from the econ department do that, Oana Borken and Ted Tarosi, who really know what they're talking about in that space. And then I take over again and talk about some of the application of those empirical methods in reality, in particular in regulated sectors where there's been a lot done. And so it's really, that session is really the implications of behavioral economics for regulation generally. Thank you.
Thank you, Amelia. And we will pass on to Sean for the final module, which is regulatory economics, and then we will sum up and cover any further Q&A.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Peter. Thanks, Amelia. The regulatory economics module is designed to provide information to what I'd call classic regulators or people interested in classic regulation, where we might be looking at a monopoly provider for one or more services, and there's a number of government activities that often affect such providers when they're regulated. So we'll be talking about the rationale for economic regulation, why one might first of all think of overseeing some of the activities of companies that are typically regulated. Then we'll discuss some of the methods that have been put in place in various countries for overseeing or controlling prices or revenues of regulated companies, which are often monopolies, sometimes natural monopolies. And then we're going to talk about one particular form of regulation, which is yardstick regulation, which many people might be familiar with as being somewhat similar to what's happened in the UK with respect to water regulation, where basically you make companies compete to keep up with others who are not their competitors. That's the point, but who serve as a yardstick. We will be discussing investment incentives within the regulated framework, and especially cost of capital. There's a very clear need for regulators who mostly recognize this, not only to oversee pricing, but to do so in such a way that encourages regulated companies to invest, and that also include one of the incentives that's important for investment is the allowed returns on that investment, which is then related to the calculation of the cost of capital. And I think that can be a very hotly debated topic between regulators, private sector, and even in public discourse. Now, then we'll move on. We'll talk about quality regulation, the institutional structure for regulation and regulatory capture, and then we will finally conclude with some newer developments that include thinking about behavioral consumers, and also thinking about equity and vulnerability among groups who are affected by regulation. So I'll stop there. I know there's a question out there, but I can't see it. So perhaps someone can read it to me.
I'll read it to you. And so there's, is the regulatory economics module going to cover issues around banking regulation? And just to top on that, there was also another question just generally to the other modules about to what extent will issues in competition in financial services / markets be covered? Which modules delve into these issues?
Yeah, this module will discuss matters that are of interest to regulators like the FCA, and has been set up in part to do that. Will it discuss the details of banking regulation itself? I would say that's not the primary focus of this module for the moment. We do discuss professional regulation, and I'm pretty interested actually in expanding to include more on banking regulation and a little bit less on infrastructure enterprises, so that there's more balance. But so far we haven't got that. So thanks.
Okay, thank you. And Amelia's just added that her behavioural policy module does have an amount of financial services regulation to it as well. So that's the full run of modules. We'll just, I guess, hold on to see if there are any more questions that come out of, come from our guests today. I will just answer one that was pre-sent regarding scholarships and any sort of discounts. I think that's an important one. I think a couple of people want me to cover off, if that's okay, Sean.
Go ahead. Yep.
Okay, so the certificate course fee for this is £3,950. That's £3,950, and that's if you sign up for the full 6 modules. Now, we don't technically have any discount on a single standalone fee like that, but what we do offer to all organizations that are sponsoring students here is that we will offer a 4th place for free on the course. So any organization over, and it doesn't have to be within the same cohort, it can be over a number of cycles, but any organization that sends us that funds 3 places on this course, if they send a 4th candidate, regardless of whether it's in the same year or the next year, that place we would allow for free. So effectively that's 25% discount if 4 attend from the same organization.
Okay, thanks for that. Please do feel free to ask questions if you have any. It's really a super opportunity with all of us together to answer any questions you might have.
We are recording this session, of course, and we will distribute a copy of this recording to everyone who signed up for the event as well. Oh, I've just spotted one on the Q&A. If all modules are completed by next year, i.e. within the first academic year, can I get my certificate by July? Not quite July. The regulatory economics module occurs during July, and the exit award board for this particular course happens in November/December time. So your award would actually be conferred at what we call an in absentia ceremony in December, and you would receive your certificate, we believe it would be via DHL the following January. And when your award is conferred, you would receive messages from our graduation department, and they would first of all let you know that you've been successful with your award and how you would like to receive it by post. But they would then extend the invitation to you to join us next July, should you wish to attend in person. And there's one more here. Does the online library access extend to all the databases that are available to undergraduate researchers, e.g. Westlaw? I don't know about that database specifically, but you would have the standard student access as if you were a student joining us on any course. And I believe the access is pretty widespread. I can't comment on Westlaw directly, but you would have, in short, there's no restriction on your access just for being an online student. And even if there was a particular...
Yeah, maybe we could take that offline as well, Peter. We might be able to, maybe you could find out and respond to the person.
Yeah, sure. I'd like
question.
to think that for interested parties, we probably could look into certain access rights and that sort of thing, if there were restrictions.
Okay. One question I've had sometimes is, is this course designed for any particular level of experience of employees? And I think the answer is actually it can be appropriate for a wide range of levels of staff. So we have many of our participants in these classes who are coming relatively new to regulators and want to gain some experience in the topic of their regulators' activity. And so this is actually a pretty fantastic way to upskill without having to go off to a full-time program somewhere, and so combines very readily with the needs of people who are recently started, but also works quite nicely for mid-career and even quite senior staff. So we've had heads of competition authorities who've taken this module and have really enjoyed it. And I think that therefore the answer to the question of for whom it's based is not focused on people's level within an organization, but more their interest and need for enhancing some of their learning or revising some of their learning over time.
So there is a question, sorry, I know you probably say that, Peter, about having access to the group chat, etc. Do we provide that, or can we do that?
That's a good question. I'm not that overtly familiar with the Blackboard platform enough to comment on that one. Actually, I don't know if that's
Is it possible to create a WhatsApp group or something, like for those that want to join, for example, to say this is for this cohort or not?
I think if there was appetite for it, we could post something out to all the attendees, and if they wanted to volunteer their number for a WhatsApp group, I think that's something we could certainly set up, and we would be happy to facilitate if that was put forward to us by someone and starting on a certain module. Yeah, we'd be happy to give it a go. There's one question about given access to journals to read. Yes, as well as open access to the library, all content that you need to undertake the particular module is already part of it's already sort of attached to the learning platform that you would have access to. So yes, that anything you need to be able to undertake the assessment and get a full understanding of the module would be provided, yes. Another question, is the course applicable to people who aspire to work in central banking?
Not really.
Okay,
not
look,
really.
yeah, but I'm going to jump in here because I'll just note that some of the skills here are actually really valuable in central banks and relatively missing. So a lot of central banks have a microeconomics unit where they may look at banking mergers, and I've certainly dealt with a number of people from central banks who are doing these sorts of things and who have benefited from a lot of industrial organization microeconomics in their work. So in that sense, this material can be quite appropriate if you're planning to if you really want to understand how influencing interest rates is going to have macroeconomic effects. This is not the course for you, I would say. But if you're interested in some of the micro aspects of banking and even crypto and finance, then I think a lot of the theories that come up here could be quite useful.
But Sean, I would say, I mean, there's industrial organization and there's industrial organization theory of banking, et cetera, which is important. It's not that we're necessarily specifically covering that, but I think one of the things that we very strongly encourage is that students are very actively participating, even when it's online, and asking questions, because if there is an interest, then we can actually cover that or adapt it or explain how what we're doing is applicable to banking. Maybe some adjustments or so, but that is, I think, incredibly welcome to have that kind of mixture, because the way of applying to something else what we're teaching is actually something that makes the teaching experience better. And so for me, kind of those who've come in and have been a little bit outside of the topics that we were teaching directly have been incredibly helpful in the sense of kind of showing the broader applicability of the principles that we're teaching about. And so I think if you understand that it's not kind of directly to the core of that, but it's really on the industrial organization of something like banking, and you're willing to come and ask questions about the applicability, then that can be very valuable to you.
Yeah, and I would just add, Kayobe, I personally, I've changed the content of sessions that I was planning to do in response to questions that I've had in earlier sessions. And I think that keeps it lively, keeps it interesting to all the students. And I would actually note that my understanding is that certainly the UK central bank has an increasing interest in this area, and the U.S. central bank has, for a very long time, had a lot of activity focused on microeconomic questions.
Yes, and certainly, I mean, if we're looking at what we're seeing in terms of merger activity, probably in banking, kind of the arguments that European banks, for example, are undersized, and how that should be influencing merger activity and so on, is something that's kind of specific, however, goes into a broader discussion about size in mergers, right? And making the differences and why there are differences is going to be an incredibly good way also of getting across some of the basic principles of merger policy in that context.
Yes.
So I think there's
absolutely.
a lot that can be said in that context.
Yep.
Okay, we just cleared out the last of the questions there, I think. Unless there's any more for any more, I think we can wrap it up.
Then maybe I'll do that. I'd like to thank everyone on behalf of the Center for Competition Policy for having expressed an interest in learning about this certificate program that we offer. I think we've really had fantastic feedback from those who have participated in it. Some of them just take one module, or they take two modules. A lot of people who do take one or two modules then end up saying, hey, I want to take all of them, and so end up getting the certificate. And it's been a real pleasure for us to have developed the program and to be involved in this interactive operation with students who are really deeply interested in the topic matter we're talking about, simply because that's part of what their current job is or what they hope a future job might be. So thank you. Okay, and thanks to everyone who's participated in this module and joined us today. It's really been a nice piece of teamwork, and looking forward to working with you on the certificate in the year to come.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.